My father-in-law looked me dead in the eyes and said I should be grateful they let me sleep in their garage. I was holding his grandchild, his own blood, 8 months old, with her daddy's eyes and my stubborn chin. And this man, standing in his $3,000 suit in his perfectly manicured backyard, wanted me to say thank you for a cot next to the lawnmower. My name is Susie O'Connell. I'm 29 years old. And 3 months ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I moved into my in-laws' house after my husband Tyler got deployed to Germany. When Tyler first brought up the idea, it sounded almost reasonable. He was going overseas for 14 months. We had a 5-month-old baby. His parents had that big house with 3 empty bedrooms. His mother, Phyllis, actually cried when she offered. She said she wanted to help. She said family takes care of family. What she didn't mention was that I'd become their unpaid servant, their punching bag, and their personal ATM. I gave up our apartment to save money for our future home. Tyler and I had been married for 2 years, and we were finally getting our feet under us. We had $47,000 in our joint account, enough for a down payment on a starter home when he got back. Then I moved into the Brennan house. You know the type. Big columns out front serving no structural purpose whatsoever. A circular driveway designed purely for showing off. The kind of house that screams, "We have money," while whispering, most of it is credit card debt. But it looked impressive from the outside, which I would learn was the only thing that mattered to the Brennans. The first week was fine. Phyllis showed me to a nice guest room. Gerald helped carry my bags. Brooke, Tyler's older sister, even brought over a casserole. I thought maybe I had been too harsh in my private judgments. By week 2, things shifted. Phyllis mentioned the guest room was actually saved for her sister's visit. Would I mind moving to the space above the garage? Just temporarily, of course. The space turned out to be unfinished storage with a camping cot and a space heater that worked about as well as a birthday candle in a blizzard. I'm pretty sure I could have stored ice cream up there without a freezer, but I told myself it was temporary. Then they took my car. Well, they convinced me to let them keep it safe. Phyllis said the neighborhood had break-ins. She said I didn't need to drive anywhere anyway, since everything was right there at the house. And I, exhausted from sleepless nights with a fussy baby, handed over my keys like an idiot. I haven't driven in 3 months. Haven't had access to our bank account either. Gerald got himself added to the account and gave me a weekly allowance of $40 for me and a baby. Have you seen the price of formula lately? I could write a horror novel about diaper costs alone. The expensive diapers that didn't give Lily a rash cost about $28 a box. That left me roughly $12 for food. I started skipping meals so my daughter wouldn't go without. Lost 15 pounds I didn't have to lose. My phone got switched to their family plan too. For convenience, they said. What they didn't mention was they could see everything I did. The one time I tried to email Tyler the truth, Phyllis found it on the family computer and deleted it. Then she took away my laundry privileges as punishment. I spent 2 weeks hand-washing baby clothes like a Victorian washerwoman while my knuckles cracked and bled. 2 weeks ago, Gerald decided the gutters needed cleaning. He decided I should be the one to do it. His exact words were that I needed to earn my keep. So I climbed that rickety ladder, made it about 15 feet up, and the whole thing shifted. I grabbed for the roof, missed, and came down hard on my left ankle. The pain was white hot, like someone drove a nail through my foot. Phyllis heard me scream. She looked at my ankle swelling to the size of a grapefruit and told me to walk it off. No doctor, no ice, just walk it off. So I hobbled around for 2 weeks doing chores on an ankle that turned purple and yellow and made sounds no ankle should make. Through all this, I told no one. My dad, Patrick O'Connell, raised me by himself after my mom left when I was 7. He worked construction his whole life, built houses, built buildings, built me. He taught me to be strong, independent, to never let anyone push me around. And here I was, being pushed into the ground. I couldn't tell him. The shame would have killed me. But last Friday, Dad decided to drive 200 miles to surprise his granddaughter for her unofficial 8-month birthday. He pulled up just as I was limping across the lawn, Lily on my hip, groceries in my other hand. I had walked 2 miles to the store and back because I had no car. My ankle was screaming, and my father saw everything. He watched me struggle up the driveway. Then he asked where my car was. I told him his mom took it, that I was lucky they let me stay. My father's face went through 7 emotions in 3 seconds: confusion, anger, rage, more rage, and finally something that scared me more than all the others: calm, complete calm, the kind that comes right before a hurricane makes landfall. He opened his truck door and spoke 4 words that changed everything. "Get in the car. We're fixing this tonight." I didn't know what that meant, but the look in his eyes told me the Brennans had just made a very serious enemy, and Patrick O'Connell didn't lose fights. Not ever. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time is it there. I see every comment and it makes my day. Thank you so much for your support. Now, back to what happened. My father drove us to a diner 3 towns over. He said he didn't want anyone reporting back to the Brennans. At the time, I thought he was being paranoid. Later, I realized he was being strategic. Everything Dad did from that moment was strategic. The man spent 35 years in union construction. He knew how to deal with bullies. And the Brennans, he told me over coffee, were running one of the oldest cons in the book. I told him everything that night. Every humiliation, every stolen privilege. The words poured out like water from a broken pipe. 3 months of silence, finally breaking free. I told him about Brooke, Tyler's older sister, who visited almost daily. Not to help, never to help. She came to report back to her mother about everything I did wrong. The dishes weren't clean enough. The baby cried too much. I wasn't grateful enough for everything her generous family was doing for poor little me. Brooke never liked me. I came from a working-class family. My father worked with his hands. In Brooke's world, that made me less than. Dad listened without interrupting. When I told him about Phyllis monitoring my emails, his knuckles went white. When I mentioned the latter, I thought he might flip the table, but he just nodded and asked one question. "What else haven't you told Tyler?" That's when I broke, because I hadn't told Tyler anything. Every video call, his parents were in the room, listening, monitoring. If I tried to text something real, they checked my phone. I was completely cut off from my own husband, but it was worse than that. Phyllis called Tyler regularly on her own phone, gushing about how wonderful everything was, how happy Susie seemed, how grateful I was. She made it sound like I was thriving. And Tyler, stuck on a base 6,000 miles away with limited internet and no reason to doubt his own parents, believed every word. Dad asked about the bank account. I told him Gerald handled everything. I got my $40 on Mondays, and that was all I saw of our money. Dad asked if I still had login access. I said I thought so. I'd never actually tried since moving in. My father smiled then. Not a happy smile. The kind a chess player makes when they see checkmate 3 moves away. He dropped money on the table and said we were going to Kinko's. Kinko's at 11 at night is a strange place. There was a guy in a bathrobe making copies of something I chose not to look at. And there was me, logging into a bank account I hadn't seen in 3 months. The numbers didn't make sense at first. We should have had around $47,000. Tyler's military pay had been depositing automatically. There should have been more by now, not less. But the screen showed $8,200. Nearly $39,000 had vanished. Dad pulled up a chair and said we should look at the transaction history. We printed page after page, and the story they told was ugly. Transfers to BB Holdings, LLC. $15,000 over 3 months. I had no idea what that was until Dad searched and found Brooke's Instagram boutique. She'd been selling healing crystals to gullible women, rocks that looked like they came from a parking lot after a rainstorm. 0 real customers and apparently 0 conscience about where its funding came from. Cash withdrawals every few days, big ones, 500 here, 300 there. The pattern matched Phyllis's lifestyle perfectly. Her twice-weekly salon appointments, her shopping trips to stores I couldn't afford to walk into, her lunches with church ladies where everyone pretended to be humble while comparing designer handbags, marina fees and boat club memberships. Gerald didn't even own a boat, but he liked hanging around people who did, using our money to fund his fantasy life. And then Tyler's credit card, restaurant charges, bar tabs, golf fees, all local, all recent, all impossible for a man stationed in Germany. Gerald had been using his own son's identity while his daughter-in-law starved in his garage. My father said something I'll never forget. He leaned back and said, "I've seen mob accounting that was more subtle than this." He wasn't wrong. The Brennans hadn't even tried to hide it. They were so confident I would never check that they'd left a trail a blind accountant could follow. Dad was already on his phone. He had a friend, a retired paralegal named Maureen Walsh, who owed him a favor. He was calling it in tonight because what the Brennans had done wasn't just cruel, it was criminal. But first, we needed to reach Tyler directly, without his parents listening. Maureen Walsh showed up at Kinko's at midnight in fuzzy pink slippers and a Michigan sweatshirt. She looked like someone's grandmother arriving to bake cookies. She was not there to bake cookies. Within 5 minutes of reviewing our printouts, she'd identified 3 criminal charges the Brennans could face: financial exploitation, fraud, and the big one, identity theft. Using Tyler's credit card without permission wasn't just disgusting. It was a federal crime, and the military takes financial crimes against service members extremely seriously. Maureen said the consequences were significant, prison time significant, but we had a problem. When I first moved in, Phyllis had me sign a stack of paperwork. Insurance forms, she'd called it. Emergency contacts. I'd been exhausted with a 5-month-old who wasn't sleeping. I signed whatever she put in front of me. Who reads paperwork from their mother-in-law? One of those documents was a limited power of attorney giving Gerald authority over financial decisions. That's how he'd gotten added to our account. He had my signature on paper. Never mind, I had no idea what I was signing. Maureen asked if I'd signed willingly with full understanding. Had anyone explained what it was? Had I been given time to read it? No to all 3. She made a note. Fraud can occur when consent is obtained through deception. This might qualify. Dad asked about reaching Tyler directly, without the Brennan filter. Maureen agreed it was critical. If Tyler didn't know what was happening, he needed to hear it from his wife first, not from lawyers or investigators. The problem was how. Tyler had limited internet time on base. Every number I had for him, his parents knew too. If I called through normal channels, Phyllis would find out within hours. That's when Dad pulled out his ancient flip phone. The man refuses to upgrade. Says smartphones are for people who don't have enough to think about. But that night, his stubbornness saved us. He scrolled to a name from decades ago. Sergeant First Class Raymond Booker, an Army buddy who now worked logistics at bases across Europe, including Tyler's base in Germany. Dad made the call right there at Kinko's. It was after 6 in the morning in Germany. They exchanged the kind of greetings old soldiers exchange, brief, profane, and oddly affectionate. Then Dad explained everything. A message would be delivered. Tyler would call a number his parents didn't know. It might take a day, but it would happen. We left Kinko's with a folder full of evidence and something I hadn't felt in months: hope, tiny and fragile, like a candle in a hurricane, but real. Dad drove us to a motel, not a nice one, the kind where the ice machine has been broken since the Clinton administration, but it was warm, and it wasn't the Brennan house. Lily fell asleep immediately in my arms. Babies sense stress. That night, with my father keeping watch by the window, she slept more peacefully than she had in months. I couldn't sleep, though. I lay there going over the numbers. $15,000 to Brooke's crystal scam, $8,000 in cash for Phyllis, thousands more to Gerald's boat club fantasy, money that was supposed to be our future home, our daughter's security, gone. The call came at 2 in the morning. Unknown number on Dad's flip phone. When I answered, I heard the voice I'd been missing for 3 months. Tyler sounded confused at first. He'd gotten a strange message from someone he didn't know, telling him to call this number urgently. Was everything okay? Was Lily all right? I started crying before I could stop myself. 3 months of holding it together came out in one overwhelming wave, and when I could finally breathe again, I told him everything. When I finished, there was silence. Long enough that I thought the call dropped. Long enough that a terrified part of me wondered if he'd believe his parents over me. Then Tyler spoke. 4 words that put my broken heart back together. "I believe you, Susie." He believed me. Without hesitation, without demanding proof, without making excuses for his family. He believed his wife. Tyler had questions, lots of them. Then he told me what he was going to do. First thing in the morning, he was going to his commanding officer. Identity theft against a military spouse was taken seriously. His parents had committed federal crimes, and Tyler intended to make sure they faced consequences. But that wasn't all. His father's 60th birthday party was Sunday. The whole family would be there. Neighbors, business partners, church friends. Everyone the Brennans had spent years impressing with their perfect family image. What if, Tyler asked, he made a surprise video call to wish his father happy birthday? What if that call didn't go the way Gerald expected? I could hear the cold anger in his voice. This wasn't just about justice anymore. This was about exposure, about ripping away the mask and showing everyone the real monsters underneath. I told Tyler I loved him. He said he loved me too. Then he said something that made me smile for the first time in 3 months. His father was about to have the worst birthday of his life. Saturday morning felt different. The sun came through that cheap motel window like the universe knew the balance was finally shifting. Lily woke up smiling, reaching for my face with her tiny hands, completely unaware her mama was about to go to war. Dad was already awake. I'm not sure he ever slept. He'd spent the night making calls, coordinating what he called the infrastructure of justice. The man had spent 35 years building things. Now he was building something different. The Brennans had no idea what they'd awakened when they messed with Patrick O'Connell's daughter. Tyler had been busy too. He called around 6 in the morning, right after meeting with his commanding officer. The military does not appreciate identity theft against service members. Tyler's CO listened to the whole story with a face like thunder, then connected him with JAG immediately. Within hours, Tyler had filed formal reports about the credit card fraud and unauthorized account access. The wheels of military justice were turning, and once they start, they're very hard to stop. First thing Tyler did was freeze every account, the joint savings, the checking, his credit card, everything. Gerald would find out soon enough when his next restaurant swipe got declined in front of his golf buddies. But by then it would be too late. No more transfers to Brooke's Crystal Pyramid scheme. No more cash for Phyllis's shopping addiction. No more boat club memberships for Gerald's fantasy life. The bleeding had finally stopped. But freezing accounts was just the beginning. Tyler wanted accountability, and he had a plan to get it. His father's 60th birthday party was tomorrow, Sunday. The whole extended Brennan clan would be there. Neighbors from the fancy houses nearby, business partners in expensive casual wear, church friends with covered dishes. Everyone the Brennans had spent years impressing with their perfect family image. Tyler wanted to burn that image to the ground in front of all of them. The video call was my idea. I told Tyler I'd suggest it to Phyllis as a surprise. She'd absolutely love having her military son beam in from Germany to honor his father publicly. She'd set up the big TV in the living room, gather all the guests for the touching moment, probably buy a ring light for perfect video quality, record everything for memories. She'd think of everything, except what Tyler was actually going to say. Maureen came by the motel around noon with updates. Her detective friend Sullivan, who'd worked financial crimes for 20 years before retiring, had reviewed our evidence informally. He said there was more than enough for a formal investigation. The power of attorney obtained through deception, the unauthorized withdrawals, the identity theft. These weren't small violations. These were felonies. Sullivan couldn't make arrests based on an informal review, but he could do something almost as valuable. He could show up at the party, ask questions, make the Brennans very nervous in front of everyone they'd spent years impressing. The formal investigation would take time, but the questioning could happen immediately. And having a detective appear at Gerald's 60th birthday, badge visible, asking about financial irregularities, that would send a message louder than any arrest warrant. Dad coordinated the timing. Sullivan would arrive about 30 minutes into Tyler's video call, just when the truth was sinking in. Just when Gerald and Phyllis were scrambling for explanations. Dad even practiced his innocent face in the motel mirror that afternoon. He kept asking if he looked trustworthy, like a friendly grandfather just there to support his daughter, not a man about to dismantle someone's entire reputation. I told him he looked perfect. He said I was a terrible liar, but he appreciated the effort. I had to go back to that house, face Phyllis, pretend nothing had changed, Play the grateful daughter-in-law for one more day. The thought made my skin crawl, but if they suspected anything, they might cancel the party. They might destroy evidence. I needed them comfortable, confident, completely unprepared. Dad drove me back around 4 o'clock. Before I got out, I texted him exactly where I'd hidden my packed bag in the garage, behind the old paint cans on the metal shelf near the lawn equipment. He'd grab it tomorrow while everyone was distracted by the party. Walking back into that house was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Phyllis met me at the door with her usual tight smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes. She asked where I'd been. I told her my father wanted some grandfather-granddaughter bonding time. She seemed annoyed I'd left without asking permission, but had too much party preparation on her mind to push it. I waited until she was arranging centerpieces before making my move. I mentioned that Tyler had called my dad's phone since mine was acting up. He wanted to surprise his father with a video call during the party. Wished Gerald happy 60th in front of all the guests. You should have seen Phyllis light up. For a moment, I almost felt bad for her. Almost. She immediately started planning. The big TV in the living room, right after the cake cutting. She'd make sure everyone gathered. She'd even bought a ring light last month that would be perfect. It would be so special, she kept saying. I smiled and agreed. Oh yes, I said. It would definitely be something to remember. By the way, if this story is hitting close to home, please give it a like and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Your support helps me keep telling these stories. And trust me, what happens at that birthday party is something you don't want to miss. Sunday morning arrived gorgeous. Blue skies, light breeze, perfect temperature. Gerald's birthday couldn't have asked for better weather. The catering arrived early. The tent went up in the backyard. Flowers decorated every surface. It looked more like a wedding than a birthday. But Gerald never did anything small. Phyllis handed me a list at 8 o'clock. 37 tasks to complete before guests arrived. She spoke to me like hired help. Actually, less than hired help. At least hired help gets paid. I completed every task perfectly. Model daughter-in-law. Invisible. The guests started arriving around 2. Business partners. Neighbors with expensive wine. Church friends with covered dishes. Brooke made her entrance in an outfit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, air-kissing her parents like she hadn't seen them 2 days ago. I watched them all. These people who smiled at me at Christmas while I starved in their friend's garage. These people who believed Phyllis's lies about my mental health. In a few hours, they would know everything. Gerald held court in the backyard, accepting compliments on the party, the house, his successful life. He looked so confident, so secure at the center of his perfect world. I wondered if he'd recognize this moment later as the last time he was ever truly happy. At 4 o'clock, Phyllis announced it was time for the video call. Everyone should gather in the living room. Her military son was calling from Germany to wish his father happy birthday. This was going to be so special. She was right about that. 53 people crowded into the living room. I counted them. Counting gave me something to focus on besides my pounding heart. Business partners positioned up front, eager to be seen. Church ladies clustered by the couch. Neighbors filled the gaps. Gerald stood center stage, champagne raised, beaming like a man about to receive a medal he actually deserved. Phyllis connected the call with a flourish. The TV filled with Tyler's face. He wore his dress uniform, looking every inch the proud military son. The room burst into applause. Someone whistled. Gerald raised his glass higher toward the screen. Tyler smiled, but something was off about that smile, something cold underneath the warmth. I was probably the only one who noticed. I knew what was coming. "Happy birthday, Dad," Tyler said. His voice was calm, controlled. "I'm glad everyone could be here, because I have some things I need to say." The room settled into expectant silence. Everyone anticipated a heartfelt tribute, a son praising his wonderful father. That's not what happened. Tyler started with the money. He spoke clearly, without emotion, laying out facts like a prosecutor. $47,000. That's what he and his wife had saved for their future, for their first home, for their daughter's security. $8,200. That's what was left. Someone in this room stole almost $39,000 from his family while he served his country overseas. The room went completely silent. Gerald's smile froze on his face. Phyllis looked like she'd swallowed something rotten. $15,000 went to BB Holdings, LLC, Tyler continued. That's Brooke's company, Dad. The one selling crystals on Instagram, the one that apparently needed my money to survive. Every head in the room swiveled toward Brooke. She'd gone pale under her expensive makeup. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish yanked out of water. She looked at her parents for rescue. None came. $8,000 in cash withdrawals, Tyler said, matching Mom's spending habits perfectly, her salon appointments, her shopping trips, her lunches with all you lovely church ladies. The church ladies shifted uncomfortably. A few looked appalled. Most just looked fascinated, the way people can't look away from car accidents. Gerald's business partners were exchanging glances, doing mental math. If he'd steal from his own son, what might he do to them? But Tyler wasn't finished. There's also my credit card, the one I've never given anyone permission to use. Someone's been charging restaurant meals, golf fees, bar tabs, all local, all while I've been stationed in Germany. His eyes found Gerald through the camera. Dad, want to explain how that's possible? Gerald's face had transformed, confident to confused to angry to something I'd never seen before. Fear, real fear. His mouth opened, probably to spin some lie. He never got the chance. The doorbell rang. Phyllis, operating on hostess autopilot, answered it. Detective Sullivan stood on the porch, badge visible. He apologized for interrupting the party, said he was following up on a report of financial irregularities. He had questions for Gerald and Phyllis. It would only take a few minutes, unless they'd prefer continuing this conversation at the station. The room erupted. Gerald's business partners suddenly remembered urgent appointments. Church ladies whispered frantically. Neighbors backed toward exits, not wanting their names associated with whatever was happening. But everyone froze when Tyler's voice cut through. I'm not finished. 53 people stopped moving. The detective stood in the doorway watching. Tyler told them about me. The garage, the cot next to the lawnmower, the $40 that was supposed to feed 2 people. The car taken away, the phone monitored, the emails deleted. He told them about the ladder and my ankle, about being told to walk off an injury that might have been a fracture, and he told them about the lies, the stories Phyllis spread about my mental health, the whispers that I was unstable, couldn't be trusted with my own baby, the campaign designed to destroy my reputation, so if I ever spoke up, nobody would believe me. I watched faces change around the room. Church ladies who'd believed Phyllis, who'd probably spread those stories themselves, looked sick. Neighbors who'd seen me limping and never offered help couldn't meet my eyes. They'd all been fooled. They'd all played their part without knowing it. Phyllis tried to interrupt, called it lies, misunderstandings, a troubled girl making up stories, but her voice was shaking. Her perfect composure was cracking. Nobody looked at her with sympathy anymore. They were looking at her like they'd never really seen her before. Gerald tried another approach, turned to his business partners, called it a family matter that got out of hand, said they could work it out privately. One partner, a silver-haired man named William, asked a simple question. Did you use your son's credit card, Gerald? Gerald didn't answer. His silence said everything. Detective Sullivan suggested Gerald and Phyllis come to the station voluntarily, answer some questions, clear up these misunderstandings. Tyler spoke one last time. He looked at me through the camera. Susie, take our daughter and go with your father. I'll be home as soon as I can. I love you both. Then he looked at his parents, the people who raised him, the people who'd stolen from him and abused his wife and lied to his face for 3 months. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't wish his father happy birthday. He just ended the call. The screen went black, and Gerald's perfect world went black with it. I walked to the door where Dad was waiting. He had my bag from behind the paint cans. Lily's car seat was ready in his truck. Phyllis grabbed my arm as I passed. Her nails dug into my skin. She hissed that I'd regret this, that she had lawyers, connections, people who owed her favors. I looked at her hand on my arm, then at her face. This woman who'd made my life a nightmare for 3 months, who'd smiled while stealing my money and starving me and freezing me and isolating me from everyone who loved me. I smiled at her. A real smile. The first genuine one I'd worn in that house. Then I said 5 words I'd dreamed about for months. I'm not scared of you. I pulled free and walked into the sunshine. Behind me, Sullivan was beginning his questions. Gerald was stammering. Phyllis's voice was rising in panic as everything crumbled around her. I didn't look back. Not once. I climbed into Dad's truck, buckled Lily in, and watched the Brennan house disappear in the mirror. The sun was setting, orange and pink streaking across the sky like the world was celebrating with me. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and phone calls, but for the first time in months, every update brought another small victory. Gerald and Phyllis were formally charged 10 days after the party. Financial exploitation, fraud, identity theft. The prosecutor added more charges once investigators really started digging. Turns out Gerald had been skimming from his business partners for years, too. Smaller amounts, harder to detect, but they added up. By the time everything was tallied, he was facing both state and federal charges. His lawyer told him to prepare for significant prison time. Phyllis tried playing victim, told anyone who'd listen that she had no idea about the financial crimes. Nobody bought it. The evidence showed she'd been an active participant in everything. The cash withdrawals matched her shopping trips. The communication monitoring was her project. The lies about my mental health were her creation. She was facing her own charges now. Brooke's situation was almost funny. Her Instagram boutique had never been properly registered with the state. She'd never paid taxes on the $15,000 she took from our account. When investigators looked into her business, they found a mess of violations. Her influencer dreams died the day the state tax authority sent her a letter demanding back payments plus penalties. Last I heard, she'd moved back in with her parents, the same parents facing criminal charges, the same house likely to be seized. Sometimes karma has a sense of humor. Tyler got emergency leave 3 weeks after the party. When he walked through my father's door and saw me and Lily waiting, he broke down. This man who'd held it together through combat training and overseas deployment finally let himself cry. We stood there wrapped together, the three of us, and I knew we were going to be okay, different than before, changed by what we'd been through, but okay. I learned something important through all this. My dad always said to keep your own emergency fund. Money nobody else can touch. I wish I'd listened better. From now on, I'll always have savings in just my name. No shared accounts without clear boundaries. No signing documents without reading every word. You never know who might betray that trust. The community reaction surprised me. I expected people to take sides. Instead, I got casseroles, cards, phone calls from church ladies apologizing for believing Phyllis's lies. One neighbor came by with homemade pie and tears in her eyes, saying she'd seen me limping that day and almost offered help, but decided not to interfere. She'd been haunted by that decision. I told her it wasn't her fault. The Brennans fooled everyone. The house went up for sale 2 months later. Gerald needed cash for lawyers. I drove by once. The for sale sign looked wrong in front of those pretentious columns. The grass was overgrown, the gardens choked with weeds. The house that was my prison was becoming a shell. I didn't feel satisfaction, just closure. Tyler came home permanently in early spring. He'd been transferred to a base 2 hours from Dad's place. We started looking at houses again, smaller than we'd planned, but ours. No in-laws with keys, no shared accounts with family, no power of attorney ever again. The last time I saw Phyllis was at a court hearing. She looked smaller than I remembered. The church lady mask was gone, replaced by something raw and scared. She tried to catch my eye. I looked right through her like she wasn't there. She doesn't get my attention anymore. She doesn't get anything from me ever again. Walking out of that courthouse, I held my husband's hand on one side and my father's on the other. Lily babbled happily in her carrier, unaware of everything. She'll know this story someday. I'll tell her that her mother was brave even when she didn't feel brave, that her grandfather drove 200 miles because something felt wrong, that her father believed his wife when it mattered most, and I'll tell her the most important lesson. You don't need permission to stand up for yourself. You don't need approval to demand respect. Anyone who tries to take your dignity doesn't deserve a place in your life. Not even family, especially not family who would hurt you. Some people mistake kindness for weakness. The Brennans made that mistake. They thought because I was polite, because I didn't fight back immediately, they could do whatever they wanted. They learned the hard way. When you mess with an O'Connell, you better be ready for the consequences. Family protects family, always. Thank you so much for watching. More of my most gripping stories are already on your screen. Click one now and don't miss the best part. You will love it. See you in the next story. His lawyer's face went white. I mean, completely white. Like someone had drained all the blood right out of him. Bradley Whitmore, the most expensive divorce attorney in the state, the man who never loses, stood there with trembling hands flipping through documents he clearly did not expect to see. My husband Vincent sat next to him, and I watched his confident smirk melt away like ice cream on a hot sidewalk. Pure terror replaced it. The man who told me to get out of his house, the man who called our daughter disgusting names, the man who thought he was about to take everything from me. He finally understood. He had already lost. But let me tell you how I got there. Because 7 weeks ago, I was the one who thought my life was over. My name is Miranda Lowry. I'm 34 years old, and for 10 years, I believed I had a good marriage. Not perfect, but good. I was a forensic accountant before I became a mom. A really good one, actually. I found hidden money for a living. I uncovered fraud schemes that executives thought were bulletproof. But when my daughter Hazel was 2 years old and got diagnosed with a chronic respiratory condition, Vincent convinced me to stay home. She needed me, he said. He made enough money for both of us, he said. I could always go back to work later, he said. So I gave up my career to raise our child and support his dreams. Funny how that works out sometimes. That Tuesday evening started like any other. I was making dinner, Hazel was doing homework at the kitchen table, and Vincent came home early. That should have been my first warning sign. Vincent never came home early. He loosened his tie, sat down at the table across from our daughter, and calmly announced that he had filed for divorce. Just like that. Like he was telling me he picked up dry cleaning. But then he kept talking, and every word hit me like a punch to the stomach. He wanted everything. The house, the cars, the investment accounts. He had already hired Bradley Whitmore, and I should just accept that I was going to lose. Then he looked at Hazel, our 8-year-old baby girl who was sitting right there listening to every word, and he said something I will never forget. He said he didn't need me or my stinky, sick daughter. He actually called her that, stinky, sick, like she was garbage to throw away. Hazel burst into tears. I held her while my entire world collapsed around us, and Vincent just sat there looking annoyed, like our pain was an inconvenience to his schedule. The doorbell rang. Of course it did, because when your life falls apart, there's always someone waiting to make it worse. Vincent's mother, Dolores, walked in without waiting for anyone to answer. She had a key, naturally. Dolores had boundary issues the way the ocean has water issues. She swept into my kitchen like she owned the place, which I suppose she now believes she did, and immediately started measuring the windows. Actually measuring them. She had a little tape measure in her designer purse, and she was checking dimensions for new curtains while my daughter sobbed in my arms. Dolores never liked me. From the day Vincent introduced us, she made it clear I wasn't good enough for her precious boy. I came from a regular middle-class family. I went to a state college. I didn't have the right pedigree or the right connections, or apparently the right window treatments. For 10 years, she dropped little comments about my cooking, my housekeeping, my parenting, my everything. Now she was triumphant. She told Vincent she was so proud of him for finally making the right decision. She said she always knew I was just after his money. The irony of that statement would become clear later, but at the time, it just hurt. Vincent gave me 48 hours to pack my things and leave his house. His house. The house I had lived in for 8 years. The house where I raised our daughter. The house where I thought we were building a life together. 2 days to erase a decade. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in Hazel's room watching her breathe, listening to the slight wheeze that never quite goes away, and I tried to figure out how my life had fallen apart so completely. I thought about all the signs I must have missed, the late nights at the office, the business trips that seemed to happen more and more often, the way he looked at his phone and smiled at messages I never saw. I had been so focused on being a good mother that I forgot to notice I was becoming an invisible wife. The next morning, while packing boxes in my bedroom like a guest who had overstayed her welcome, I found something, a bank statement that had fallen behind Vincent's nightstand, probably months ago. I almost threw it away with the dust bunnies, but old habits die hard, and when you spend years analyzing financial documents, you can't help but look at numbers. Something was wrong. The account balance was way too small. I knew roughly what Vincent earned. I knew our monthly expenses. The math didn't work. There should have been at least 3 times this amount in savings. Where was the rest of our money? I tucked that statement into my purse. At the time, I didn't know why. Maybe instinct, maybe hope, maybe just the forensic accountant in me refusing to let a discrepancy slide. But that crumpled piece of paper would change everything. Vincent stood by the door as I loaded the last boxes into my car. Hazel was already buckled in the back seat, clutching her stuffed rabbit and looking confused about why we were leaving our home. Vincent didn't hug her goodbye. He didn't even look at her. He just checked his watch like we were making him late for something more important. Probably a golf game. Or his girlfriend, though I didn't know about her yet. I drove away from the house I had paid for, the life I had built, and the man I thought I knew. My daughter asked me when we were coming back home. I didn't have an answer, but I had that bank statement. And I had 10 years of professional training that Vincent had apparently forgotten about. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time is it there. I see every single comment and I appreciate each one of you so much. Your support means the world to me. Vincent wasn't satisfied with just ending our marriage. He wanted to destroy me completely. Within days, our mutual friends stopped returning my calls. One of them finally admitted why. Vincent had been telling everyone I was mentally unstable. He said I had substance abuse problems. He hinted that I might be an unfit mother. 10 years of being a devoted wife and mom, and suddenly, I was the villain of my own story. I found out later he had been building this narrative for months. Little comments at dinner parties, concerned whispers to neighbors. He was laying the groundwork for his perfect divorce before I even knew there was a problem. The man should have been a novelist instead of a real estate developer with that kind of creative fiction skills. But the worst part came in the mail 3 weeks before Vincent even filed for divorce. An explanation of benefits from our health insurance company, informing me that Hazel was no longer covered. He had removed her from his policy. My daughter, who needs regular treatments for her respiratory condition, who requires medication every single day, suddenly had no insurance. The first pharmacy bill arrived at our tiny rental apartment. I stared at the number and felt physically sick. That was more than our monthly rent for one prescription. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about my daughter's health. Vincent was using our child as a weapon, and he didn't even have the decency to care if she got hurt in the crossfire. I think that's when something shifted inside me. Fear started turning into something else, something sharper. I met with a divorce attorney that week, a nice woman with a cluttered office and sympathetic eyes. She looked at my case, looked at Vincent's lawyer's name, and her face fell. Bradley Whitmore. She actually sighed out loud. She told me I should probably just take whatever settlement he offered because fighting Bradley Whitmore was like fighting a tsunami with an umbrella. Great. Very encouraging. I asked how much Whitmore charged per hour, and she told me. I calculated that just sneezing in that man's presence probably cost about $500. A few days later, I had to go to Vincent's office. During divorce proceedings, both parties have the legal right to request financial documents. I needed copies of tax returns and business statements. Vincent's secretary, a quiet woman named Ruth, helped me gather what I was entitled to see. She had kind eyes and a nervous habit of looking over her shoulder, but I barely noticed her that day because of what I saw through Vincent's office door. There she was. Tiffany Vance, 26 years old, blonde highlights, designer clothes draped over my husband's desk like a human decoration. She was laughing at something Vincent said, touching his arm in that way women touch men they're sleeping with. And when she saw me standing in the doorway, she smiled, not embarrassed, not apologetic, smug. She looked at me like I was already yesterday's news, and she was the shiny new tomorrow. The affair had been going on for 2 years. 2 years of lies, 2 years of business trips that weren't business trips, 2 years of late nights at the office that were very much not about work. While I was home taking care of his daughter, managing his household, supporting his career, he was building a whole separate life with someone else. I went home and made the mistake of checking social media. Tiffany's Instagram was a monument to my husband's betrayal. Photos from Paris, romantic dinners and restaurants Vincent always said were too expensive, beach vacations in places we never visited as a family, caption after caption about living her best life with #blessed and #grateful. I was grateful too. Grateful I hadn't eaten dinner yet because I definitely would have lost it. Then came Dolores's contribution to my public humiliation. She posted a long message on social media about how happy she was that her son had finally gotten rid of the gold digger who had trapped him. She wrote about how Vincent deserved better than a woman who couldn't even produce a healthy grandchild. She said my family had defective genes. She actually typed those words where everyone could see them. The comments filled with sympathy for poor Vincent and his difficult decade married to someone like me. The settlement offer arrived by certified mail. Bradley Whitmore's letterhead was very impressive, probably cost a fortune just to print. Vincent was being so generous, the letter explained. He would let me keep my personal clothing and my car, which was titled in my name anyway. Everything else went to him. The house, all investments, retirement accounts. I would receive minimum child support based on his reported income, which I already suspected was much lower than his actual income. I had 30 days to accept this offer or face the full force of his legal team in court. I sat at my kitchen table in that cramped rental apartment, listening to Hazel cough in the next room, and I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not despair, not fear, clarity. Vincent had forgotten something important about me. He remembered the wife who made his dinner and raised his child and smiled at his mother's insults. He forgot the woman who used to tear apart fraudulent financial statements for a living. He forgot that before I was Miranda Carrington, the homemaker, I was Miranda Lowry, forensic accountant, and I was very, very good at my job. I pulled out that crumpled bank statement from my purse. The numbers still didn't add up, and now I was going to find out why. I hadn't used my forensic accounting skills in 6 years, but it turns out that kind of training doesn't disappear. It just waits, like a computer in sleep mode, ready to wake up when you need it. I started spreading documents across my kitchen table every night after Hazel went to bed. Bank statements, tax returns, credit card bills, anything I could legally obtain through divorce discovery, plus the records I had kept over the years because accountants are natural hoarders of paperwork. My grandmother used to say that numbers don't lie, but people use numbers to lie all the time. Finding the lies was my specialty, and Vincent had been lying for a very long time. I called my old college roommate, Patricia Holbrook. Patricia and I had studied forensic accounting together, pulled all-nighters before exams together, and dreamed about catching corporate criminals together. She had stayed in the field and built a successful practice. When I explained my situation, she didn't hesitate. She said analyzing my husband's shady finances sounded like her idea of a perfect Friday night, and she was absolutely in. Patricia came over with wine, takeout Chinese food, and a legal pad. We spread everything out on my living room floor like a financial crime scene. Within 2 hours, she was pointing at numbers and making that face she used to make in college when she found something juicy. She told me my husband was either terrible at math or hiding a lot of money. I told her Vincent was actually excellent at math. She smiled and said then we were going to have some fun. Meanwhile, Vincent escalated his attacks. His lawyer filed a motion for full custody of Hazel. The reasoning made me want to scream. Vincent claimed I was financially unstable and couldn't provide proper care for a child with medical needs. The man who removed his own daughter from health insurance, who called her stinky and sick, now wanted full custody. He didn't want to be a father. He never really had been one, but he knew threatening to take my daughter would hurt me more than anything else. Hazel was a chess piece to him, a way to force me to surrender. But I wasn't surrendering. Not anymore. The first discovery came after 3 nights of digging. Hidden accounts. Vincent had opened investment accounts at a different bank than our regular one. Accounts that were never disclosed on our joint financial statements. The total in those accounts was over $200,000. Money he had been siphoning from his business income for years, claiming it went to expenses and taxes. Money that should have been marital property. Money that would have paid for Hazel's medical care without me lying awake at night, wondering how I would afford her prescriptions. But the house was the real revelation. The house Vincent kept calling his house. The one he was so eager to keep in the divorce. I remember when we bought it. I was 7 months pregnant with Hazel and having complications. The doctor had put me on bed rest. Vincent said he would handle all the closing paperwork. He brought me documents to sign, and I signed them because I trusted my husband completely. What a cute, naive thing I was back then. My grandmother had passed away in our first year of marriage. She left me $200,000. It was the most money I had ever had, and I wanted to use it to build something meaningful. We put $175,000 down on our house, my money, my inheritance. I have the bank transfer records. I have the closing statement showing that amount as the down payment. But when I finally looked at the deed, really looked at it, my name wasn't there. Vincent had put only his name on the title. He had taken my grandmother's money, used it to buy a house, and then made sure I had no legal ownership of it. I called Patricia at midnight to tell her. She asked if I had proof of the payment. I told her I had bank records, the original transfer, and closing documents showing the exact amount. She said Vincent was either incredibly arrogant or incredibly stupid, possibly both, and that we were going to bury him. But we found more, so much more. A shadow company registered in Delaware, offshore accounts in places I couldn't pronounce, a pattern of transactions that looked exactly like textbook embezzlement. Vincent wasn't just hiding money from me, he was hiding money from his own business partners. He was committing fraud on a scale that went way beyond divorce court. I thought about his partners. Nice men I had met at company dinners over the years. They had families too. They trusted Vincent. He was stealing from all of us. My grandmother also taught me to always keep emergency money separate, a secret savings account that nobody knows about, she would say, because you never know when life will surprise you. I had $8,000 in an account Vincent never knew existed. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and it was about to become the foundation of my fight back. I also still had my professional certifications. I had kept them current over the years, doing occasional online courses during nap times and quiet evenings. I told myself it was just in case I ever wanted to work again. Now I realized some part of me had always known this day might come. The accountant in me had been preparing for disaster, even when the wife in me believed in forever. The evidence was growing. The pieces were connecting. But I needed help to put it all together in a way that would hold up in court. I needed a lawyer who wasn't afraid of Bradley Whitmore. I needed someone who would see what I saw, a path to victory hidden in Vincent's own arrogance. And I found her. Her name was Camille Ortega, and she worked out of a small office above a bakery downtown. No fancy reception area, no intimidating artwork. Just a desk covered in case files, and a woman who looked at me like she already knew I was going to win. Patricia had found her through professional connections. Camille had been practicing family law for 22 years, and she had beaten Bradley Whitmore twice. He still pretended not to remember her name at bar association events, which she found absolutely delightful. I couldn't afford her normal rates. I was honest about that from the start. But Camille looked through the evidence Patricia and I had compiled, and her eyebrows went up higher and higher with each page. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair and smiled. She said she would take my case on partial contingency, a small retainer now, and a percentage of whatever we won, because we were absolutely going to win. She called Vincent's case a house of cards built on quicksand during an earthquake. I liked her immediately. Patricia's loan covered the retainer. $8,000 from my grandmother's secret fund covered initial filing fees and document preparation. My grandmother had been gone for 9 years, but she was still saving me. I think she would have appreciated the poetry of that. Camille's first instruction surprised me. She told me to act defeated, let Vincent think he had already won, cry at the right moments, seem confused by legal procedures, make his lawyers comfortable in their arrogance. The more confident they became, the sloppier they would get. And sloppiness leaves evidence. So I played the role of the overwhelmed housewife who didn't understand big, complicated legal things. When Vincent's lawyer sent intimidating letters, I responded with meek requests for more time. When Vincent himself called to gloat about his inevitable victory, I let my voice shake. He told me I should just accept his generous offer and save myself the embarrassment of losing in court. I said I was thinking about it. He laughed and said that was the smartest thing I had done in years. Meanwhile, I was building a case that would end his career. Patricia and I worked every night. We documented every hidden account. We traced every suspicious transfer. We calculated every dollar that should have been marital property, but somehow ended up in Vincent's secret portfolios. The total wasn't $200,000 anymore. When we finished counting, it was over $600,000. $600,000 hidden from our marriage, hidden from the IRS, hidden from his own business partners. My husband wasn't just a cheater. He was a criminal. The evidence about Tiffany was almost funny. Almost. Vincent had bought her a car. A very nice car that cost more than I spent on Hazel's medical care in 3 years. He bought her jewelry, including a necklace worth $4,000 that I remembered seeing on the credit card statement and asking about. He told me it was a client gift. He also rented her an apartment so they could have their private romantic getaway spot 15 minutes from our family home. The receipts for all of this were in his business expense records, which he had claimed as tax deductions. So he wasn't just cheating on his wife. He was cheating on the IRS, too. They tend to frown on that sort of thing. Then Ruth came forward. Ruth, the quiet secretary with the kind eyes who had helped me gather documents that day at Vincent's office. She called me one evening, voice barely above a whisper, and asked if we could meet somewhere private. We sat in a coffee shop across town where nobody would recognize us, and she told me everything. Ruth had worked for Vincent for 9 years, almost as long as his company had existed. She had watched him build his business, watched him charm investors, and watched him slowly transform into someone she didn't recognize. She had seen the fraudulent invoices. She had processed the suspicious wire transfers. She had filed the paperwork for the shell company in Delaware. For years, she told herself it wasn't her business. She needed the job. She was a single woman approaching retirement with no safety net. But 5 years ago, Ruth's daughter went through a divorce, a terrible one. Her daughter's husband was wealthy and connected, and he took everything. Her daughter lost her home, lost custody of her kids for 6 months, almost lost her mind. Ruth watched her own child suffer while a powerful man used the legal system as a weapon. Sound familiar? When Ruth saw Vincent filing for divorce, saw how he talked about me and Hazel, something broke inside her. Or maybe something finally healed. She had been keeping copies of documents for years, just in case, she told herself. Just in case someone ever needed them. She handed me a folder that was 3 inches thick. It was everything. Records Vincent thought had been deleted. Emails he assumed were gone forever. The complete paper trail of his fraud, organized chronologically and cross-referenced by transaction. Ruth had been a secretary for 30 years, and apparently secretaries know where all the bodies are buried. Metaphorically speaking, of course. No actual bodies in this story. I asked Ruth if she understood what would happen when this came out. She would lose her job. Vincent would probably try to sue her. Her retirement plans would be complicated at best. Ruth smiled and said she was 62 years old and she was tired of being complicit in hurting good people. Some things matter more than a pension. Besides, she added, she had already applied for a job at her cousin's accounting firm. They were expecting her to start in a couple of months. Camille nearly cried when she saw Ruth's documents. She said this was the most beautiful evidence package she had ever received. We now had enough to win the divorce case 10 times over. But more importantly, we had enough to trigger federal investigations, tax fraud, wire fraud, embezzlement from business partners. Vincent wasn't just going to lose his divorce. He was going to lose everything he had ever stolen. We prepared 3 copies of the complete evidence file, one for the court, one that would be anonymously delivered to the IRS, because I am a good citizen who believes in paying taxes, and one that would arrive at the offices of Vincent's business partners 2 days before our final hearing. They deserved to know who they were working with. The hearing was scheduled for 7 weeks after Vincent filed for divorce, expedited because of the child custody issues and Camille's emergency motion regarding fraud in Vincent's financial declarations. The judge assigned to our case was Eleanor Fitzgerald, known for having zero tolerance for lying in her courtroom. Things were coming together. Vincent called me 2 days before the hearing. He sounded relaxed. happy even. He said he was looking forward to finally putting this behind us. He mentioned that he and Tiffany were planning a trip to celebrate after his victory. The Maldives. Very romantic. Very expensive. He suggested I use my settlement money wisely since it would be the last help I ever got from him. I said I appreciated the advice. I wished him safe travels. And I hung up the phone and laughed until I cried. He had no idea. No idea at all. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, the faint smell of old paper and anxiety. I had dressed carefully that morning. Professional, but not flashy. The kind of outfit that says, I am a responsible mother, not a gold digger. Camille had coached me on this. Appearances matter, especially in family court. Vincent arrived with Bradley Whitmore like they were walking into a victory party. Expensive suits, confident smiles, the easy body language of men who had never lost anything important. Whitmore carried a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Vincent winked at me across the courtroom. Actually winked, like this was all a fun game he had already won. Dolores sat in the front row of the gallery, wearing a dress that screamed, "Look how wealthy and superior I am." She had a small notebook, probably planning to write down every humiliating detail of my defeat to share with her friends later. Tiffany was there too, a few rows back, checking her phone and looking bored. I wondered if she had started packing for the Maldives yet. And there, in the back of the gallery, sat 3 men I recognized from company events, Vincent's business partners. They had received their evidence packages 2 days ago. They had not told Vincent they were coming. Their faces were completely unreadable, which was somehow more terrifying than open anger. If you're still here with me, I just want to say thank you for listening to my story. If it's touching your heart, please take a second to hit that like button and maybe share this with someone who needs to hear it. Your support keeps me going, and I'm so grateful for every single one of you. Now, let me tell you what happened next. Judge Fitzgerald entered, and everyone rose. She had gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked like a librarian who had seen too much nonsense in her life and had no patience left for any more. I liked her immediately. Whitmore presented Vincent's case first. He painted a picture of a successful businessman burdened by an unstable wife who had contributed nothing to their marriage. He talked about Vincent's generous settlement offer. He expressed concern for poor Hazel, who clearly needed a stable home environment that only her father could provide. He used words like erratic and financially irresponsible and pattern of concerning behavior. It was a masterful performance. Complete fiction, but masterful. Then it was Camille's turn. She started small. Simple questions about our marriage, our home, our finances. Vincent answered confidently. Yes, the house was purchased during their marriage. Yes, it was titled in his name only. No, his wife had not contributed to the purchase. She was not employed at the time. Camille nodded thoughtfully. Then she introduced Exhibit A, the bank records showing a wire transfer of $175,000 from my personal account to the closing company 8 years ago. The amount exactly matching the down payment on the house, the date exactly matching the closing date, the memo line reading house down payment in my own handwriting. Vincent's smile flickered. Whitmore leaned over to whisper something. The judge's eyebrows rose. Camille introduced Exhibit B, documentation of my grandmother's estate, showing the inheritance I received. The source of those funds traced clearly from her accounts to mine to the house purchase, a house that Vincent claimed I had not contributed to. The judge asked Vincent directly if he had any explanation. He stammered something about joint finances and marital contributions being complicated. She did not look convinced. Then came the hidden accounts, Exhibit C through Exhibit J. Investment portfolios totaling over $600,000. Accounts opened solely in Vincent's name at banks I had never heard of. Deposits that matched exactly with discrepancies in his reported business income. Money that should have been disclosed as marital assets. Money that had been hidden from me and from this court. Whitmore's face changed. The confident lawyer mask slipped, revealing something like panic underneath. He objected repeatedly. The judge overruled him repeatedly. Vincent was no longer smiling. He was staring at the documents like they might burst into flames if he concentrated hard enough. Camille introduced the shell company records, the offshore accounts, the pattern of transactions that spelled fraud in letters a mile high. She explained calmly that these documents had also been provided to Mr. Carrington's business partners, who were present in the courtroom today. She added that the information may also be of significant interest to certain federal agencies. Vincent turned around and saw his partners for the first time. The color drained from his face. One of them, a man named Gregory, who had always been friendly to me at holiday parties, just shook his head slowly. The disappointment in his eyes was devastating. Bradley Whitmore asked for a recess. His hands were actually trembling. The legendary lawyer who never lost, who charged $500 just to think about your case, was coming apart at the seams. Judge Fitzgerald denied the recess. She wanted to see where this was going. Camille introduced the evidence of Vincent's affair, the car he bought for Tiffany, the apartment he rented for their meetings, the jewelry, including that $4,000 necklace, all claimed as business expenses, all deducted from taxes. She noted that this appeared to constitute tax fraud in addition to marital fraud. I glanced at Tiffany. She was no longer looking at her phone. She was looking at the exit. Survival instinct finally kicking in, I suppose. She slipped out of the courtroom quietly, probably realizing that the Maldives trip was not going to happen and that being associated with Vincent Carrington was about to become very uncomfortable. Dolores sat frozen in her seat, mouth hanging open slightly. The notebook lay forgotten in her lap. This was not the story she had planned to tell her friends. Vincent tried to speak. He said this was all lies, all fabrications, that I had somehow manufactured evidence to destroy him. Judge Fitzgerald cut him off. She had seen a lot of cases in her career, she said. People lied to her all the time. But the audacity of lying this extensively, this brazenly, while committing fraud against a spouse, business partners, and the federal government simultaneously was genuinely impressive. And not in a good way. She looked at Vincent the way you look at something unpleasant stuck to your shoe. Then she looked at me, and for just a moment I saw something like respect in her eyes. Judge Fitzgerald's ruling was everything I had dreamed of and more. Full custody of Hazel to me. The house, which I had paid for with my grandmother's inheritance, transferred entirely to my name. 70% of all marital assets awarded to me due to Vincent's fraud, hidden accounts, and perjury before the court. Full child support calculated on his actual income, not the fake numbers he had reported. Medical expenses for Hazel covered completely, and Vincent was ordered to restore her health insurance immediately, retroactive to the day he had removed her. The man who said he wanted everything was about to lose everything. The man who told me to get out of his house was now legally required to get out of my house. The man who called his daughter stinky and sick would spend the next 10 years paying for her care, whether he liked it or not. But the court ruling was just the beginning of Vincent's collapse. The federal investigation started within 3 weeks. Tax fraud is not something the IRS takes lightly, especially when it's documented this thoroughly. His assets were frozen pending investigation. His passport was flagged. The Maldives would have to wait, possibly forever. His business partners filed their own lawsuit. Embezzlement from a partnership is a serious matter, and Gregory and the others were not feeling forgiving. They wanted their money back plus damages. Vincent's lawyers, plural now because Whitmore had mysteriously developed a scheduling conflict that prevented him from continuing representation, were billing hours they would probably never collect. Dolores stopped posting on social media. Her friends had seen the court documents, which were public record. The gold digger story didn't hold up well when everyone could read about her son's $600,000 in hidden accounts and his ongoing federal investigation. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she had taken down all her posts about the divorce and was telling people she had always had concerns about Vincent's character. Some things never change. Tiffany disappeared from Vincent's life approximately 45 minutes after the court ruling. The apartment he had rented for her was in his name, and with his assets frozen, rent was no longer being paid. The car was repossessed 2 weeks later. I don't know where she went, and I found that I genuinely did not care. She was a symptom, not the disease. Vincent had plenty of problems that had nothing to do with her. Ruth retired on schedule. She sent me a card congratulating me on my victory, with a pressed flower from her garden tucked inside. She wrote that her daughter had cried happy tears reading about the case, and that sometimes justice really does win. I framed that card. It sits on my desk at my new job. Because yes, I went back to work. It turns out that forensic accountants who can uncover massive fraud schemes are in high demand. Patricia recommended me to several firms, and I had 3 job offers within a month. I chose the one with the best health insurance and the most flexible schedule for a single mom. My skills had been sleeping for 6 years, but they woke up ready to work. Hazel and I moved back into our house. I let her pick new colors for her bedroom, and she chose purple with silver stars. We adopted a cat from the shelter because Hazel had always wanted one, and Vincent had always said no. She named him Biscuit, and he sleeps at the foot of her bed every night. Her breathing is better now. Regular treatment, proper medication, a stable home where she feels safe and loved. She still asks about her father sometimes. I tell her the truth in age-appropriate ways. He made some bad choices. He has to deal with the consequences. We will be okay. Last month, I ran into Vincent at the grocery store. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by wrinkled khakis and a shirt that needed ironing. He saw me and opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, but no words came out. I walked past him without stopping. I had nothing left to say to him. Some people think being quiet means being weak. Some people confuse patience with surrender. And some people really should pay more attention to their wife's career history before trying to steal everything she has. My grandmother used to tell me that the universe has a long memory and a good sense of timing. I didn't always believe her. But sitting in my kitchen now, watching Hazel play with Biscuit in the backyard of the home I fought for, I think maybe she was right. Justice doesn't always come fast, but when it comes complete. Thank you so much for watching. More of my most gripping stories are already on your screen. Click one now and don't miss the best part. You will love it. See you in the next story.